Thanks very much. I just have to say, what's with my spray tan in that photograph? That's bad. Thanks very much. So our panel today is about hacking the system and why the imperative is now. And I think we've heard through the course of today about the fact that our institutions are designed for stability and fairness and accountability, but we have AI that's evolving at pace. It rewards iteration, and it compounds quickly. So they're two very different things that we have to pull together. So the provocation for this panel this afternoon is more about the how. How do our systems move at pace as this moment demands? So the first question I'm going to start with is, what's different about this AI moment that is different compared to other periods of digital transformation in the past? And I'll maybe throw that first to you, Cindy.
Sure. Is this on? Yes, it is. Well, thank you, and good to see everybody again. I think what's different now, in reality, is just speed. I mean, you think about all of the other generations of technology, and you think about with the announcement of ChatGPT, which is now almost 2 years, and you look at the compression of the AI model generations, which are now happening and following every single week. And so to me, it's just simply speed. And as much as we've talked about AI today, the biggest growth trajectory ahead of us is robotics. And we need to somehow get that into the dialogue, because the cobots are coming rapidly. So
I think, obviously be more focused in the health space, but I think the difference now for us where AI is, it's such a disruptor, right? It's such a disruptor. And I think it's what is disrupted is it's empowered people. People have the tools, the information at their hands and their fingertips, and it's shifted the system to be less paternalistic, and it's leveled the playing field. So I'll say that helping people, citizens be informed, empowers them to have a different conversation about their health, what they need to do, and I think that's a healthy thing and balances. Also, I think the other piece in the health system, it's not sustainable. We're taxpayers, and I actually pay too much money, too many taxes today, and the health system is not sustainable. It's imperative that we shift into a digital age, or I don't know where the Canadian health system will go.
I think I'd build on that would be how much an individual with the right knowledge, what specific outcomes they can achieve is unlike anything that I've seen. I've been in the tech industry as a founder for close to 30 years now, and the amount of resources or skills that were required just to amass a shot at taking some risk and building something that's valuable was enormous. And now I see every day individuals that are able to not just build, but achieve outcomes, very real, measurable outcomes with the things they build. That as an individual contributor, as an individual that's maybe starting a business, it's a very real thing. It's not just time. It's clearly it takes less time. It's that the risk is significantly lower. That means that people that were averse to risk can start contributing. And I think that's probably the biggest difference about this is the outcomes are incredibly real, incredibly measurable, and it's just more about people gaining the experience with these tools to start affecting that change.
So the technology's evolving so fast. There's the imperative for change around the status quo not being sustainable. And then I think what you've talked about, Matt, is that democratization of creation, of that ability to ask those questions at the individual level, creating differential expectations than we've had before. So how are institutions, whether that's public sector or private sector, could be a big corporation or a province or a nation, how do we create the conditions for that kind of speed? And I'll start with you again.
With me. So I've heard a really consistent theme in a lot of the talks today. It feels like there is more readiness now to kind of transition. A lot of the conversation I think in the last couple of years has been about the technology and the speed and what's possible. And now there seems to be enough consensus that it's time to act. I think, change is hard. Most of us don't like it. Some of us fear it. But I heard out of a few of the speakers today about creating the conditions for that change to happen, giving people permission, or not just the resources, but the culture to fail. And I think that there's, especially in startups, which is a lot of my experience, in the past, there's been this kind of the idea of fail fast or move fast and break things. And I think this is what's different now is you do have a different feedback loop that's possible. So you can move fast, but the key thing is how fast you can learn. But it does require organizational will. It does require priorities. It does require clarity, strategy. These things didn't go away. I think if anything, they become more important. But I think if it kind of boil it down to one thing is creating an environment where failure is not just tolerated, as it's expected. The risks associated to that failure are mitigated, but that creativity is not constrained so much that it can't happen, because the promise here is that there's amazing inventions or progress that can be made by individuals everywhere, and that if this technology can unlock it, it's going to be a function of that organization that they're contributing to that will actually bring it to life.
Cindy, that makes me think about your role on the board and advising the board and board accountability around that risk equation. How does that shake out?
Well, first of all, how many here are certified board directors through the ICD? Just to get a show of quick hands here. How many people are certified? Okay. Anyways, the reason this question is really important is especially whether it's private, remember I'm a former venture capitalist, right? Or publicly traded company or even government, you need to really ensure that the top tier has the knowledge to be engaged meaningfully in the conversation. So that's crucial because we do have knowledge gaps. The CEO leadership team is there to execute the strategy. The boards, and they're responsible for shaping the strategy. The board directors are there to ask the hard questions to ensure there is depth and robustness to manage risk across the ecosystem, not just within that corporation. They have accountability to many different stakeholders. So the piece of the puzzle that we're still evolving, I've been out doing a lot of board director governance training to many organizations, and they're curious and hungry to learn. One good example of a really quick story is one of the largest banks in the world chose to come to Canada. They're from the UK, I just can't disclose. They spent 2 weeks here in Canada visiting different companies that were curated, I can say Gartner Group and our company. And what was interesting was just the sheer vulnerability, because they had to express their fears deeply. And that vulnerability was so important. But what a brilliant CEO, it was a new CEO, that came in and said, I have to invest because, and he was, I won't say which prior big consulting firm, I might disclose too much. Anyways, the long story short is that you have to really deal with that tapestry. We need the bottoms up, top down, but if we don't get the top layers right, we can't change and move as quickly because the budgets are always a reality, and there's never enough of the budget, as we know. So I think that's a big gap we have in this country, and it's a serious one. So I think a takeaway for all of you is to go back and just look at the budget in terms of how you're all upgrading. Probably one of the most important learning developments of our lifetime.
And maybe if I can probe on that a little bit, are boards ready? Because in previous waves of digital transformation, you'll get the board chair and the executive directors talking about that and seeming to be supportive of that. But many CEOs and executive management run into problems because they're saying the right things but aren't supportive of what it takes to do that. Are boards ready now?
I think the conversations have shifted. I've certainly seen a higher demand in the last 12 months than I did 2 years ago. And I think it's because there are so many statistics that are coming out on the imperative, and you can see that there's language alignment. I think some of the stories that we've heard today are helping. And so, yeah, I do see that the discourse is changing. Certainly all the financial services banks, the large players, have got it, right? Just to be very clear. The issue we have is 96% of Canada, speaking of from a Canadian point of view, is small business. And there we have a bigger gap. But definitely the larger publicly traded companies, they're hearing, they're asking the hard questions, they're putting in the risk structures, they're re-architecting their talent. One of our chief data scientists, the founder of our company, is also now the senior VP at TD. I can disclose that. But he owns all of the re-engineering thinking worldwide for one of the big banks. Huge mandate, upskill all of that so that we move faster, right? So huge investments. But they've all done tremendous training of the executive suites. But I worry about the small business ecosystem. So when I heard the Alberta minister, who was very, provocative of giving educational content to train Alberta citizens and then think, bring it across the country. I mean, Estonia did amazing things, right? Where they said, we have to educate all our citizens. And that's a sense of urgency that we need to do. Because I think, But I do think things have changed, for sure.
I think that's really positive to hear where Canada is leading. Scott, you've worked in the federal jurisdiction. You've worked in a provincial jurisdiction. Public sector seems to be a little bit different. How have you approached that with those institutions?
I think it's picking up on what Matt said. It's really, and the theme of the day, it's around culture. And unfortunately, governments tend to be risk adverse in general. And I think we need to look at the culture. The culture within an organization, how do you be transparent and educate people so they understand risk? And just as importantly, if not more importantly, educate your citizens on risk as well. Like AI doesn't mean everything. I used the example of we'll talk about this morning about, an AI scribe. Yeah. And the Auditor General in Ontario released a report recently, it hallucinates. Well, hello, everyone knows that. Human in the loop. Today, you think in today's world, a physician takes notes or takes it by memory, writes an assessment note, they sign off on it, there's human error involved. And AI is going to produce error as well, but the physician's in the loop to review it. It's not part of your health record, so they review it, they decide, and they sign off. So understanding and being willing to have an open dialogue about risk. I said to my CEO the other day, I said, when someone falls down on the sidewalk, and that's terrible. We don't want people to fall down and hurt themselves. We don't close sidewalks, right? So things happen in today's environment, nothing to do with AI. We need to understand risk and be willing to have an open conversation about what real risk is. There's low risk and there's high risk. We do not want to put high risk in patient care. But I think that's where we go. AI doesn't mean everything. AI is a very broad meaning. And I think it's time we had an education and a conversation across with citizens, because that's how you move away government risk aversion.
So we shouldn't be seeking that perfection. We've been told for years perfection's the enemy of good, but I think that goes out the window when we think about AI, and some of the fear comes from the fact that we can't be 100% accurate, and if we can't, we shouldn't proceed. So I'm hearing that we need to rethink that differently. Matt, if I can then bring you in from the perspective of someone that supports innovation, how do you do that and balance so that you don't trip in too much into that risky area?
So I think for startups, risk can sometimes be existential. So we spend a lot of time helping teams kind of mitigate risk, but more prioritize the risk, right? In startups, the number one reason startups fail is they build something no one wants. And that can happen slowly or very fast, and we'd prefer that founder to understand the reality of what risk is out there, regardless of whether or not they prepared for it or not, as soon as possible. But the way in which we do that is through experimentation. So I've heard the term hypothesis used here a lot. It's very much baked into our operating system in that all founders or anyone, any innovator, any inventor is kind of operating on a future state of the world that's true. And the theory is mostly wrong, right? So if you from day one, you kind of operate as, I know it's wrong, I'm not sure how wrong it is, and then start thinking pragmatically about what risk would be too much to tolerate. And as we're saying here, like have conversation and then start de-risking until you won't have perfect data. You won't ever have perfect data, but you have to place a bet. The bigger the bet, the better data you should have, the more research you should have, the more evidence there should be that supports your assumptions that what direction you're going or what is needed and valuable in the market is supported by it. And so it's not complicated, but it's not easy to do. So there's big difference between those two things. Like startups have to prove empirically that someone wants the thing that they want to build. And we prioritize that with, will they spend time? Will they spend money? Will they refer or spend their reputation to kind of show that this is a valuable thing? And then the next stage is to move them into like, how pervasive a problem is this? And can you build a business around it? I don't think it's much unlike that in other contexts. The risk profiles are different, but it's the same method, right? Form a hypothesis, have assumptions that you need to test, and disprove the theory as quickly as you can. Proof looks like success, or validation looks like success. What you expected to happen happens. It's way better to find out how wrong you are as quickly as you can. And then when that happens, like consistently enough, trust starts going up. The abstract nature of a problem now turns into a set of activities that we can go execute and bring back better data around, and it becomes less ethereal and less abstract. So I think over time you see people that their tolerance for risk is really a function of their experience with risk, and the better you're at making bets, the better you're going to do from an outcome perspective.
So use that iteration, those feedback loops, to start to build that risk tolerance. Scott, it seems to me that you've done some of that with the work that you've done on Your Health Nova Scotia. Maybe like to comment on that?
Yeah, I could listen to Matt talk all day, to be honest, because it really resonates to me. And if you haven't got it by now, I look at things very much through the lens of a Nova Scotian. I have a profession, but it's the end user that really matters. So I'm going to pivot where I was going to say, Samantha. Obviously, we can look at some of the things we've done. There's always the balance between going too fast and the tension about, going slow enough is going to be risk aversion. And don't lose sight of the fact that, individual patient care is front and center in my head, right? So we're not minimizing any negative impacts, but we make decisions today that maybe aren't the best, most informed decisions in healthcare today. So what do we need to do? We need to have, right validation, rigorous testing, right? We need to do exactly what Matt talked about, human-in-the-loop design. We need to prioritize engagement, public engagement. People need to know. And that's one thing I haven't heard enough of today, is that we talk a lot about modeling and getting, understanding things internally. And here's what we could do. We could shift policy. All that's fantastic. It needs to be done. When are we going to tackle human behavior? Right? Because there is no one-size-fits-all. I'm a pretty informed individual. I know that if I exercised more and I ate better, I'd probably be healthier. And I choose not to. So tell me why that is. When we live in a world that this is what you shall do and you'll be better, people don't do that. Let alone people who are uninformed. How do you get to them? So one thing that's top of mind with me right now, if I can take us through a little bit of an exercise, I'm conscious of time. You know what? We've got this great bunch of data. We've got ways to engage people and reach out to people and poke people. There's some people, if you tell them this is what you should do, they're going to do it. And there's others going to tell them what to do, going to do the opposite. There are stubborn people like myself and gamblers like myself who do what we want. But what if we took it to a world of how do I engage you in some sort of digital way that's at your convenience and some sort of health check around questionnaires that we do physically today? You know what, Matt, tell me about you need something. Tell me about yourself. You know what, what's your habits for smoking, drinking, exercise? Wonderful. Give me your blood pressure. Tell me your mental health. Can take that intake with all of the health data we had. And what if I could say to Matt on that data, Matt, although you're 30 years old, you know what? Your heart's actually about 60. And if you don't change some of your behaviors in the next 10 years, you're on the path for this. Now, if I told Matt that it was a 2% chance of that, I shouldn't say that. If you told Scott it was a 2% chance, I'd say, great, 98% chance. I'm gambling with that. If you told me it was a 23% chance, which is clinically relevant, I'd still say, I don't care. 77% chance I play the odds. If you told me that my heart was 20 years older than my physical age, I'm going to pay attention. And then I could say, here's the things that you can do to influence that, whether it be around preventing diabetes, exercise, eating differently. I give you the tools to help you make changes based on your behavior in your everyday life. How do you motivate people? That's where we need to go if we want to get to a healthy population and get out of sick care and get into wellness.
Make it easy for people to do the right thing and nudge them in the right directions. I think that's really interesting, Cindy, from the perspectives of what you talked about, cobots and devices. So how do we think about governance over those things that gather data passively? What does the research say?
Oh, that's a loaded question, and I don't have much time. Okay, I'm going to kind of do a bit of a build. First, one of the things we need to understand is how the human brain functions neurologically. I just want to make that point very clear and distinct about us understanding how humans process information and understand we have a limbic brain in the back and in the front. You know, that's where our deeper cognitive critical thinking is. And as leaders, the best pathway forward is to start understanding we need to understand the neurological functions of the brain. So I'm building on that on the point on the cobots, because we're into a generation of cobots that are building artificial brains based on exactly how the brain functions to outperform us in robotics. So I've been following the cobot industry for over 10 years. I travel to China regularly. I've been to the Chinese construction bank, where effectively there are no humans. You can't have any human interaction unless you have at least 1 million, and they're testing that for over 300,000 branches. And if you look at Singapore, they've decided as a country to be the smartest, intelligent nation in the world, and I just came back from there. And I was blown away because I had a chance to experience the little vehicle cars that can fly, and I've always wanted to be in the Jetsons, and they are working the skyline and architecting that right now. So in terms of your question of what do we do, I think we have to leapfrog is my main message. We're all here embracing AI. There's been wonderful examples. I loved your story, Scott. I mean, we talked about that. But I also know for Canada, as a country, we have to think beyond. And we've got to understand robotics. Quantum, we're moving along, and there's some interesting developments. But I think in your strategies, you've got to leapfrog ahead. And in the world of healthcare, Nova Scotians, I don't know how many are in the room, but you have an opportunity to be the first in this country to introduce cobots into the hospital systems. It's happening. They work. There's lots of things that they can do better. And so I think we really need to have a trajectory vision that's much bigger than maybe we're all thinking about. Because the only way to really scale is to build something that nobody else has yet in place that creates a beacon of light. I don't remember, I think the gentleman was Will, and he put on the word hope. Dr. Ulrich is one of the top leaders in the world. If you don't follow him, you should. And he said, we're at the generational pivot in human lifetime where hope has to be our guiding perspective in humanity. And I think the Pope's issue of the 83-page report, which I've read, and I've written about it, there's a good article there in my channel summarizing it, is really highlighting that. And it's not from a religious point of view. It's really emanating the power of what a human's all about and to really think hard about it. So yeah, it's a loaded question, which you asked me. But yeah, that'd be my thoughts.
Thank you. I think my hope with robots is that they can learn to dance a little bit better or play football better. I'm not so worried right now, but in the future, perhaps. So we're almost out of time. Before we wind up, I'd like to ask each of you in turn to think about the real foundations of what we need to do as Canadians first. And if you can think about a one-liner, can be a long line, but a one-liner on what we need to get right. What we need to get right, what we need to do first in Canada.
I think it's pretty simple in my mind. It's each of you has a foot. You have another foot. start moving, start doing, start executing, and making a difference, not just for yourself, but for your family unit and the control systems that you have in your universe. Each of those footsteps creates a footprint, a DNA strand, I like to say, and they can all connect. But we need to move. And I think going back to Mike's comment this morning, we need to execute, and let's make today's conversation meaningful. So that'd be my hope.
I think for me at the Canadian level, we have really incredible leadership in Nova Scotia. We're very privileged. I feel very privileged to be able to work in this province and do what we're doing, and it's because of incredible leadership. I think Canada needs more leadership. It really does. And Canada is a federation, right? That's a fact. Jurisdictions are equal partners in it, and we need to respect that. And that's a struggle that we haven't mastered in Canada. And I think one of the struggles we have is we're trying to get everyone on board the same page. We don't need that. Nova Scotia's taken the lead. We've gone in places where no one has gone before in this country and globally, and there's many other examples of that. I don't need everyone to be on board. Give me a few partners, right? And we can help lift each other up. That's leadership, because lack of that is inertia, right? And that's not good for you and I and every Canadian. So we need to do better, stop competing and start helping how we lift each other up, because it is about the Nova Scotian. So I think the driver for that, where I go back to where I started earlier this morning, is you and every other Canadian. Like, you need to demand more from your leadership across this country to drive health, because health is about you. And that's what it needs to be. You have the power to demand more and demand nothing less. Think big.
I think the meaningful thing that I'm drawing on is having watched in the last, I'll say, 18 to 24 months, countless times, way too many times that I can remember, of witnessing an individual and their mindset change around this technology because they experienced it firsthand in a way that was super personal and relevant to their context. It is a meaningful shift. And then it's almost like they can't unknow it. They know that there's a path forward that, with this technology, it can be applied to their life, and it personalizes it. So I would say the number one thing is to intentionally invest in our talent in this region, to experience this technology from the context in which they're going to contribute, the workforce here, to experience it firsthand and applying it to their role so they can contribute more. That experience cannot be taught. It has to be one-on-one, and I think if we put more intention there, you're likely going to have more individuals kind of tune in and start using it, even if they don't consider themselves innovators.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think, you've heard from the horse's mouth today, your imperative to use your feet, to demand the leadership do the same, and to get engaged, to be able to understand how these tools work, to get your families and your friends engaged as well, and to start to make it happen. Thank you very much, Matt, Scott, and Cindy.
Thanks, Pam.